Yamato is the smoking hot Chad your girl beats it to every night, and he easily gets all the baddies in school because they are all obsessed with his glizzy. However, after he abandons the hotties on his roster to have a serious relationship with a chick that looks like Usopp, the entire school bullies her, but he still chooses her. This story starts with a dream where Mei remembers being betrayed by her friends from the past and eventually wakes up for school. After hopping in the shower, she joins her mom for breakfast and quickly gets dressed before heading out. At the train station minutes later, a bunch of girls going to the same school start talking about how weird she is, but she ignores them and keeps waiting until the train arrives. Once at school, she runs into another group and they start asking if any guy has ever even tried to have a go with her melon seeds. As she also ignores them and heads into class, an ugly-mouthed breather named Kenji yaps to his friend Yamato, a tall, handsome alpha that almost makes Gojo look ugly. Kenji gets pissed at him for not taking the number of a hottie they met the other day, so Yamato says he didn't see her that way at all. Just then, a baddie named Asami calls out to them, so Kenji stretches out his arms to feel her warm milkers, but she ignores him and runs into Yamato's arms. After saying she had been trying to call him throughout the previous night, she suggests going to the karaoke place sometime in the week and runs off. Kenji then threatens to chop off Yamato's balls if he even looks in her direction, but Yamato reminds him that he is the one who can't stop dreaming about her melons. Kenji tries to defend himself, but he suddenly bumps into Mei, who then glances over with a mean look on her face and leaves. Yamato gets curious as he has never seen her before, so Kenji explains how she is basically an outcast that absolutely hates talking to people. On their way to a class shortly after that, Kenji spots two chicks trying to hide their buns and runs up to get a good look. After he tells them to stop trying to hide their obvious need for attention, they completely ignore him again to focus on Yamato.
He can't keep getting away with it!
He then spots another chick with a longer skirt and tries to pull it up without realizing that it is Mei. Yamato immediately catches up to stop him, but Mei thinks he is the creep harassing her and kicks him off the stairs before going yelling.
What'd I do?
Kenji and the girls try to check on him to see if he broke anything, but he suddenly starts laughing like the fall disconnected his brain. After classes, Mei walks to her locker and finds threatening notes from Yamato's fangirls before he also shows up to talk with his hand still bruised from the kick. She asks what he wants, so he explains that Kenji was the one who pulled up her skirt and apologizes on his behalf. She also apologizes for his hand and tries to leave, but then he admits to finding her interesting. He tries to explain, but she tells him to shove the interest down his snotty cakes and leaves to feed a stray kitten in the backyard. As she starts heading for the gate, he sneaks up on her and asks if they can exchange details, but she thinks he is trying to be a polite robber and refuses. After he explains, she still says no, so he writes his number down and hands it over in case she ever wants to talk. She then hands over a band-aid for his bruises, and he tries to complain about it being too small, so she pulls out an entire roll and hands it over before running off. Moments later, she begins to wonder why someone like him is suddenly interested in talking to her and decides to completely avoid thinking about s***ing on his perfect face. Several minutes later, she clocks into her part-time job and starts setting up without realizing that a creepy customer has been sizing up her buns.
That's suspicious.
At the counter, moments later, he takes a good look at her and almost asks a question but changes his mind and leaves after paying. Over the next couple of days, she keeps avoiding every attempt Yamato makes to talk to her until he asks if she treats all her friends the same way. She then pulls up her empty contact list to show him that she doesn't have friends and says she prefers it that way because friends are all fake haters waiting for a chance to show their true colors. Yamato tells her to stop thinking that way because not everyone has ulterior motives for friendship, but she tells him to stop being so naive and runs off. Just then, Kenji shows up with Asami, who then says they have to go to the karaoke place after school. Hours later, Mei finishes up at work and sees the customer from before waiting outside, so she quickly starts walking home while he slowly follows behind her. At a certain point, she realizes that he has been getting closer and runs into the nearest store to call her mom, but after minutes of not getting a response, she decides to call Yamato, who is currently at the karaoke place with Kenji and a couple of girls. After she explains the situation, he immediately runs over to the store, and she shows him the guy, so he first gets some ice cream to help her cool off. He then grabs her by the shoulder and leads her out to face him. Upon seeing Yamato, he gets shocked and tries to ask who he is, but then he suddenly confesses to Mei and starts sucking faces with her.
What?
As the shameless PDF keeps watching, he starts using tongue and stares him down until he gets fed up and leaves. Yamato then asks Mei if she is okay, but she remains frozen in shock as his lips are the first she has ever tasted. The next day, she ends up at the karaoke place with him, and Asami tries getting her to pick a song, but she refuses and keeps staring at Yamato's lips. He suddenly gets closer to make her sing with him, but she pushes the mic away, ruining what could be her only shot at a regular life. On the way home, she thinks back to her reaction after the kiss and how he tried to apologize after realizing that it was her first kiss. After she explained how surprised she was to see that he actually showed up, he said he would always show up if she needed help and asked if she would do the same for him. Before she could refuse again, he reminded her that he now had her number and opened up the ice cream. Just then, he stops her to ask if they can walk home together, and she uses the opportunity to offer him some money for the ice cream, but he says he already received the payment when they sucked each other's mouth juices. In a dream the next day, he meets her at the station so they can catch the same train and proceeds to unlock the Ree's Master Special during the entire ride. After waking up, she quickly prepares and heads over to school, where he startles her at the lockers before joining Kenji and a bunch of girls. Just then, Asami shows up to ask for him and keeps talking to her in class like they have suddenly become besties. After yapping about Yamato, she tries to offer Mei a hairball, but Kenji snatches it up and keeps messing with her, hoping to get her melons close enough to himself.
You sussy baka!
In the bathroom afterward, Asami straight up asks Mei if she has tasted Yamato's Magnum sausage, but she says they only kissed, and Asami says it's no big deal because she is not completely ugly. Right then, two chicks walk in and start making fun of Asami for having massive knockers, but she merely smiles and starts heading out. Minutes later, she gets to a restaurant with Mei, who then asks how she easily deals with people making fun of her. Mei explains how she has always had to deal with haters because her melons got ripe much sooner than the average baddie. Back then, guys in class would always wait for the perfect opportunity to make fun of her because of it, but one day, Yamato showed up and turned the tables by exposing the guys for being closet creeps who secretly wished they could get a chick with melons like hers. Asami explains that their relationship started back then, so Mei asks if she has feelings for him, and she admits it but says it's pointless because he easily kissed her once, which made her realize that he doesn't really like her. She further says that he probably acts nervous around girls he actually likes, and says the only girl he hasn't kissed in school is the chick he first fell in love with. Later that night, she tries to think about everything, but he suddenly calls to ask if she will be coming for another karaoke night. When he mentions that he will be going with girls in the same class as his first love, Mei asks if she will also be there, and he says yes. She then tells him about the rumors going around about him being a face-sucking psycho and tries to figure out why he hasn't kissed his first love, but he only says he does what he wants. In school the next day, she finally finds the chick named Ariha and wonders why she is so special to him. After Ariha catches her staring, she leaves but comes back to spy as she talks with Yamato. Her covert stealth mission hits a snag when two guys catch her in the act, so she heads to the ladies' room to hide. Just then, the same two girls from before show up and continue talking about Asami until Mei laughs and asks how they can make fun of someone while constantly painting their faces like Pennywise's distant cousins. Minutes later, Yamato finds her with a nasty handprint on her face and asks if she got bullied, but she claims it was just a bad fall. After he puts a band-aid on it and says he is now worried about her, Asami shows up and also gets concerned. Meanwhile, Kenji, who is currently playing soccer, looks around to find Asami's melons until the ball knocks his lights out. In the clinic, moments later, Mei and Asami try to enjoy each other's company, but the bullying clowns show up to continue their assault. As they tell Mei to mind her business next time and ask Asami how she can live with herself despite having enough milk for a small village, Kenji shows up to defend her honor. Unfortunately, his half-baked brain cells cause him to only focus on how amazing her mega melons are, and that only makes her feel worse. Upon realizing his mistake, he tries to apologize, but the bullies use it to insult her even further, causing her to get emotional and run off. Kenji tries to catch up but ends up explaining to Mei that he doesn't just like her for having mega melons. After she tells him to focus on explaining what he actually feels for her, he runs off and finds her all alone in a classroom. He then stops her from leaving and apologizes for what he said earlier on before saying that he has always loved every single thing about her. Around the same time, Yamato and Ariha start to wonder why he hasn't shown up so they can go to the karaoke place together. He also asks if they have seen Mei, but Ariha ignores the question and says she is ready to head out. Hours later, Mei spaces out while washing rice, so her mom takes over, and she goes into her room before Asami texts her, saying she is going out with Kenji. At the time, Yamato is at the karaoke place with Ariha, who then asks about his kissing escapade and asks if he still has the same feelings he once had for her. While Mei sneaks out and races to reach the karaoke place, Ariha asks Yamato for a kiss and says he can't say no if he easily kissed the school's ugliest outcast. Moments later, he heads out alone and sees Mei spying, so he walks over to meet her, and she asks why Aria is not with him. He then tries to tease her for stalking, but then she turns to leave, so he pulls her back and kisses her again. This time, she pushes him back and asks how he can so easily kiss someone without feeling anything. As she tries to hold back the tears, he pins her against the wall and unleashes his deadliest combination of kisses while saying he has feelings for her. Upon seeing that her inner walls have been activated, he gives her some space to catch her breath before leaning in for the finishing move. At school the following day, she covers up the stray cat, and Yamato shows up to talk about how it likes her. But she ignores him, so he asks why her hair looks rough. As she says it probably needs to be cut again, he immediately asks if he can follow her to the salon. Days later, she ends up running all the way to the park, where he commends her on having enough balls to show up late for her first ever date. After apologizing, she reminds him that it is not actually a date, but remembers how she spent hours trying to select an outfit before her mom saw the dresses and put on an entire show just to congratulate her on finally finding love. Yamato then tells her that Kenji has been overdosing on ecstasy after Asami decided to go out with him and thanks her for helping out. She ignores the small talk again to get going, but he pulls her back and asks to hang out since she doesn't even have a reservation at the salon yet. She reluctantly agrees, so he tells her to choose between a movie and karaoke, but she freaks out about being in a close space with him, so he says there's nothing to worry about because he won't go further than kissing her. Just then, she notices that all the girls around have been talking about how he is too hot to be dating her, and a recruiter suddenly shows up to talk, but he respectfully declines and leaves with her. As the gossip only increases, she stops and asks if he usually gets a lot of girls flirting with him, and he admits to it, so she asks if he is really okay being with the female version of Slender Man. After saying that he isn't like all the other handsome snubs, he grabs her hand and reminds her that they are now an official couple. Moments later, they get spotted by Masashi and another chick named Aiko, who notices their interlocked fingers and gets curious. Masashi asks if they want to make it a double date at the bowling alley, and Mei reminds Yamato that she has to get her hair cut, but Aiko insists, so she agrees to it. At the alley a couple of minutes later, she keeps glaring over to know what Yamato sees in her, while Masashi gets the game started with his complete lack of skill. Mei gets the next turn, and Masashi asks Yamato if she can even hold the ball straight, causing her to activate God mode, which she then uses to get a perfect strike. After a series of perfect strikes, Yamato starts treating her like a goddess, and Masashi tries to do the same with Aiko, but she tells him to shut the hell up and asks Mei to get drinks together. Once at the vending machine, she starts asking about her relationship with Yamato, but Mei says she still barely knows what exactly is happening between them. Aiko then asks why she is even here. She is so unsure and reminds her that there are countless chicks who would kill for a chance to get his pipe. After telling Mei that she has already tasted his glizzy, she heads back inside, and Mei follows, but after a very lazy shot, she decides to leave. Yamato tries to chase after her, and Aiko holds him back so they can continue together, but he tells her that he only wants Mei and runs off. While he tries to find her before the rain hits, Masashi tells Aiko to forget about Yamato since she has him, but she tells him to shut the hell up so she can think. Just a few years ago, she was in her prime and kept blowing her friends off to be with her boyfriend at the time. Her obsession with being perfect for him led to a nasty skin infection that she kept trying to cover up until the day Yamato helped pick up her mirror and said she was beautiful without all the mascara.
Stop the cap.
After finding out that her boyfriend was cheating on her, she broke down in Yamato's arms and basically blackmailed him into clapping the depression out of her. She then developed an eating disorder to become the Juliet to his Romeo and has been trying to become his girl ever since. While Masashi wonders how he even met such a delusional psycho, Mei reaches the school backyard to check on the stray cat, and Yamato eventually finds her there. He asks why she left, so she thinks back to what Aiko said and asks why he chose her. He first plays with the cat, which shocks her, and explains how it warmed up to him after a few visits before saying he wants to show her something. They end up at his old school, where he takes her round back to a spot that he once punched a hole through. Back then, he was scared of all the bullies in class and decided to blend in by being the handsome nice guy so no one would pick on him. When his best friend started getting bullied, he joined the rest of the class to avoid him and only talk to him in private until the day he switched schools to escape all the harassment. After that, he took out his frustrations on the wall and started hating himself. He then tells her that he is the one who actually isn't good enough because he has continued being the handsome nice guy to avoid problems. But then Mei tells him that he definitely has good traits that keep his friends around. She also admits to wanting to trust more people instead of hiding away, and he commends her on being strong enough to remain true to herself even if people hate her for it. After saying that the kick on the staircase is what made his heart skip a beat, he asks for permission before getting a kiss. Minutes later, the rain finally lets up, so they start heading out, and she realizes that it is already too late to get that haircut. But he tells her to consider growing her hair out cause it will look really good. Meanwhile, Aiko, who has just finished emptying Musashi's nuts, decides to keep fighting for Yamato. At school the following Monday, she hands over the jacket he gave her, and he makes her stretch out her hand for a gift. As his face causes her inner walls to flood, she remembers what Aiko said before seeing that he made a matching bracelet as a symbol of their love. A little while after that, Aiko overhears basically everyone talking about how Mei has been glowing up after she started hanging out with Yamato. Mei then enters and walks past a guy named Hayakawa, who takes a good look at her before running into Yamato and Kenji. He asks Yamato if he wants to hang out, but Yamato gets shocked because he hasn't heard from him in a while. So Hayakawa admits that he just wants to see Mei. A chick named Mihiro suddenly jumps on his back and asks if he will be free on Saturday so they can bust a fat one together. After he easily agrees to it, she leaves and he explains to the guys that they do it whenever they feel like. He then asks Yamato to meet Mei again, so he promises to ask her and finds her in a separate hallway moments later. She tells him that she attacked a teacher for trying to take her bracelet, and he kisses her hand for protecting their love, but she gets shy and slaps him. He then tells her about Hayakawa and says it will be a good chance for her to make new friends. Meanwhile, Hayakawa has just told Aiko about it and asks if she can also come, but she refuses and continues thinking about everything she put herself through just to get Yamato's wood. Later that day, Hayakawa meets up with Mihiro, who then points out the fact that he would have been on the same level as Yamato if he stopped passing his magic stick around to everybody that asked for it. After he says Yamato is only scared of handling Kitty like a real man, she tells him to stop projecting his issues and gets distracted by a call from the simp she is cheating on with him. The next day, he finds Yamato to ask about their plans, and Yamato tells him that Mei is only free on the weekend, so he immediately cancels the cream pie appointment with Mihiro. Days later, he finally gets to meet her, and Yamato offers to split the bill with him, but he says it's no problem and tries to make Yamato look like a broke beta. Upon seeing that Mei doesn't care, he asks if she has trouble talking to people. So Yamato says she has always been like that and gets his arm smacked away. As she continues stuffing her face, Yamato tells Hayakawa all about her friendless, lonely life, so he offers to introduce her to a couple of girls and asks for her digits. Just then, Yamato gets a call, so Hayakawa signals him to leave, which he foolishly does to answer the phone. Hayakawa then tells Mei that she has really gotten a lot prettier, but she says nothing has really changed in her life aside from her relationship with Yamato. Hayakawa suddenly asks if she wants to glow up even more, and leans in to say that he can help make her the baddest in school by teaching her the sloppiest Hakutua to make Yamato happy. She responds by pulling out her phone and deleting his number before paying for the food and saying she hates shameless creeps like him. After she leaves, Yamato gets back and asks what happened, so Hayakawa acts like she just decided to leave, but after seeing the money she left, he realizes that something happened and runs out to find her. As he keeps trying her line, Hayakawa comes out and asks why he is so bothered when she is just another chick he can easily replace. Yamato then cracks his face with a nasty cross, grabs him by the collar, and says that Mei isn't like the shameless hoes he claps every week. At school the following week, he tries to find her in class, but the girls say they haven't seen her, so he leaves just as she leaves the ladies' room. Later on, Hayakawa tells Aiko all about the nasty punch he took, and says something is up with him, but she says he is just too stupid to see that he takes his relationship seriously. As she turns to leave, he gets pissed and asks why she is so obsessed with him, so she explains how different Yamato is from the worthless creeps he spends time with. Hayakawa then tells her to stop thinking she is hot enough to be called a baddie because she practically ruined her body for a guy that will never take her seriously. Mei, who had overheard their entire conversation, walks up to tell Aiko that Hayakawa is actually a dirty slob who eats like his brain is still in the prehistoric era. He immediately grabs her collar to threaten her, but she stands on business, so he shoves her to the ground and leaves. After Mei gets back up, Aiko asks why she is trying to be a hero, so she explains how she hates bullies and commends Aiko for being able to sacrifice for the people she has loved. Aiko goes nuts and tells her to stop acting like she understands, but then Mei says she actually admires her because she has always been scared of being around people until Yamato helped her realize that it isn't so bad. She further says she is now ready to fight for her love, and Aiko sees that she is actually serious. So she tells her not to worry about her because Yamato dumped her traumatized cakes a long time ago. After she leaves, Mei finds Yamato playing with the cat, and he apologizes for what Hayakawa did, but she tells him to forget about that and asks if he really clapped Aiko. After admitting to it and saying he didn't want her to go nuts over the heartbreak, he promises to never stick his pencil in any sharpener except hers. Instead of the usual freakout, she pulls his hand in for a kiss, and he grabs her for a warm hug. A few days later, Mei finds an abandoned kitten in a park and tells Yamato that she can't take it home because they already have one. He tells her not to worry because an animal shelter will probably rescue it, but she tells him to stop being so nonchalant because the kitten is obviously stressed out. Hours later, Mei gets a call from Yamato, who proceeds to beg for help because the kitten has finished all his milk and threw up a full slice of sashimi. After telling him to cut it into smaller sizes, she also helps him get started with potty training, and he thanks her afterward. At school the next day, he shows Kenji and Asami pictures of Kuro, and they both unlock a level of cringe that starts affecting Mei, who is just trying to enjoy some peace and quiet. On the way home that afternoon, she stops to thank him for taking Kuro in and apologizes if he feels like she forced him into making the decision, but he tells her not to worry because he actually loves Kuro and wants to adopt him. He then asks if she can come over to his place with her cat, Marshmallow, so he can have a playdate with Kuro, and she agrees. In her room later on, the reality of her decision finally hits, so she frantically searches for a bag for Marshmallow. That Saturday, she makes it to the mansion he lives in, and he tries to lead her in. But then his sister, Nagi, comes out to nag him for not putting some food in Kuro's bowl. She then asks who the overdressed stickman is, so Yamato introduces Mei, who then tries to greet her. After asking Yamato why he is dating Walmart Zendaya, she heads back inside, and Yamato apologizes to Mei. As he takes her up to his room, Nagi finishes up a pie she has been baking, just as Yamato presses his dingleberries into Mei's back. She gets scared as she realizes that he can force her kitty to spread. But he promises not to do anything she doesn't like and hops on the couch. She then tries to join him but trips and lands on his thigh. She immediately tries to move, but he pulls her flatboard cakes into his magnum and tells her to stay still so he can enjoy her scent. After helping her relax, he tells her to start calling him by his first name and says he can't wait to hear her say the 3 magic words.
I'm Batman.
Just then, Nagi walks in to serve her pie and gets terrified seeing them together. So she yells for someone to come save her brother from Mei. Yamato gets her to calm down and explains the situation, but she refuses to listen and tells Mei that she will never accept her as his girl. Yamato then tells her to apologize or go back to her room, so she throws her stuffed bunny at him and runs off. After picking it up, he tells Mei that she started being a spoiled brat almost 6 months ago when she suddenly started avoiding school. Back then, her friends would always beg to hang out at her place, but then they would make her a private chef while they played games and left her out of any serious conversation. One day, she said they couldn't come over because she had relatives showing up, so they decided to kick her out of the friend group as she was no longer useful to them, so she started skipping school to avoid them. Soon after that, he bought her the stuffed bunny so she wouldn't feel so alone anymore. With the sob story finally complete, Mei takes a bite of the pie and gets shocked by how good it tastes, and Yamato then tells her that Nagi is actually a Gordon Ramsay wannabe. Just then, Kenji calls and asks him to pick something up, so he promises Mei that he will be back soon and quickly leaves with his bike. After minutes of trying to stop the cats from clawing each other's brains out, she thinks about Nagi and goes to her room to return the stuffed bunny. She tells her the cake was amazing and asks if she has other interests besides baking, so Nagi pulls her inside to see her handmade collection of stuffed animals. Mei starts glazing harder than every K-pop army on the planet, but Nagi tells her to relax because she can easily learn the same skills on YouTube. Mei then tells her that she actually once tried to bake but ended up cracking her dad's teeth with her cookies of death. Nagi then tells her to stop infusing her lack of talent with the bunny, so she gives it back, and Nagi says it is her only friend. Mei then tells her that she is actually trying to make new friends, and Nagi asks if having her hot brother is not enough. So Mei explains that she had always hated the idea of having friends because of a past betrayal. Nagi also says she hates everyone and will never have friends again, but then Mei tells her how Yamato helped her realize that not everyone is a heartless freeloader. She further tells Nagi to always try and make friends because there is definitely someone who shares the same interests as her, and they both take a moment to stare out the window until Mei remembers the cats. Thankfully, they have learned a non-violent way to coexist, so Nagi gives her a stuffed teddy to squash the beef, and Mei immediately starts messing with her. Moments later, Yamato gets back and apologizes for taking so long before he sees them sleeping together. At a photo shoot the following week, a hot model named Megumi serves face better than Aqua, but the editors start to discuss getting a male hottie to complement her beauty. Meanwhile, Yamato keeps trying to learn how to pet the stray cat and almost loses his finger in the process. After Mei tells him not to worry, as she doesn't completely hate him just yet, she gets a text from Nagi but says it's from her mom when he asks. He then tries to set up another hangout for the both of them, but she declines to do some work and apologizes. After telling her not to worry about it, he heads inside, where Asami and Kenji ambush him with a surprise hug. He reminds them that he isn't into three-ways, but they tell him to relax as they are only excited to show off their love. While his brain starts to hurt from the cringe fest, Mei checks the text and finds a recipe for the cupcakes she made over the weekend. Nagi told her it was a really easy recipe, but she had already accepted that she could only bake poison, so Nagi asked for her number and promised to send the easiest recipe. After school, Yamato tells her about Kenji and Asami's relationship as they head home, and she admits to liking the way they care for each other. Once at the junction closest to her place, she turns to leave, but he pulls her back for a hug and asks why she still doesn't call him by his first name. She then explains that she is still too nervous for that step, so he promises to be patient until she is ready. Later that day, she gets started on the recipe from Nagi, but then her mom gets back, so she tries to hide it. She forgets that the eggs are not invincible, and her mom teases her for finally working on her lack of talent just for a guy. At school the next day, Megumi calls an old friend from Mei's school to ask about it as she makes her way in and suddenly becomes the hottest main character. Kenji immediately runs to tell Yamato, but he doesn't even know who she is, so Kenji drags him to the stairs just in time to get a good look at her perfect face. Just a few minutes later, she gets surrounded by useless NPC nerds who try to exchange information, so she says her phone's memory is full and promises to give them her number later on.
Stop the cap.
While the girls take over and ask for skincare tips like there is some special lotion that can cure their hideous faces, Mei notices, but continues heading up to complete a task. After school, Yamato gets stopped outside the gate by Megumi, who then says she wants to be his girl because she fell in love with his face at first sight and would like to sit on it. She then claims to not give a flying turd if he already has a girl and grabs his arm to kickstart their new life as the hottest couple on the planet. But he takes a deep breath and says he wouldn't be caught dead in between her worthless cakes. She freezes in shock, so he pulls away and runs over to Mei so they can walk home together. The very next day, she puts on a show in the hallway to apologize for not taking his relationship seriously and asks Mei if they can be friends. After she reluctantly agrees, Yamato also apologizes for being a little too harsh on her. Kenji asks about the details of what happened, but Megumi refuses to talk about it and tells him to ask Yamato. On the way home afterward, Yamato asks Mei why she isn't curious about it and says she should at least ask about things like that. The next morning, Megumi finds her with Asami and says she has no idea where her next class is. Just then, Yamato shows up, so Asami tells him to show it to her. He tries to meet Mei first, but Megumi says they are running out of time, so they leave and the entire school starts treating them like the couple of the century. Megumi uses that opportunity to tell Yamato that her agency is trying to recruit a new model and he would be the perfect option, but he says he isn't interested. That night, Mei finishes making a batch of cookies and uses a hammer to make sure it isn't another overbaked rock. She then takes a piece to see if she got the taste right and realizes that she still has no chance of bagging a traditional alpha. Fearing that it might just be her taste buds, she tries to feed Marshmallow, but after a quick sniff, he runs for dear life. In class the next day, Yamato tells Kenji that he plans on helping Megumi's agency for their next photo shoot, as they still haven't found a male model to recruit. After Kenji and Asami beg her to tag along, they also ask Mei if she wants to see it, so she hides her insecurity and accepts. Megumi then tells him that he has to meet the agency staff after school, but he says that might be a problem as he usually goes home with Mei. Before Megumi can even ask, she tells him not to worry about it because they don't always have to go home together. On the way home after classes, she starts thinking about how they have recently always been together and regrets not having enough balls to fight for her love. At the agency studio the next day, Megumi finishes up with her makeup and shows them before Yamato also comes out and gets shy as Kenji and Asami keep complimenting his looks. After Mei approves the look, they start the shoot, but as Megumi seizes every opportunity to grind up on his magic stick, her heart gets shattered to pieces, and she starts bawling her eyes out. At the train station the next morning, she hears two girls talking about how good Yamato looks in the magazine and tries to ignore it, but the excessive glazing continues at school, causing her mind to constantly play back the way they both looked like Kim and Kanye before the divorce. In class a few minutes later, Asami continues rambling on about how good he looks and asks her for an opinion, so she says he looked good. As Aiko also shows up to talk about how famous he has become, Megumi carefully watches as he asks Mei if they can go home together again. After classes, he immediately starts heading out, but Aiko stops him and asks if he is that obsessed with Mei before returning a note he once gave her. Just then, Megumi asks for some of his time and ends up gathering the entire squad in Mei's class to tell them that she wants him to keep modeling for her agency. Kenji and Asami tell him to accept, but he reminds them that he never really liked the idea of being a full-time model. Megumi then explains that he will be getting paid the same as an official model and can quit whenever he wants, so he asks Mei for her opinion. Once again, she hides her insecurity and tells him to accept, as it could be a life-changing opportunity, so he agrees to it. As they all decide to walk home together, Kenji suggests having a party since Megumi and Yamato are going to be busy in the coming days, so Megumi suggests going to a karaoke spot. Asami then reminds them that Mei sounds like a frog giving birth, so she tells them to have fun without her disappointing Yamato, who wanted to be with her. The next day, Asami continues telling Mei all about Megumi's perfect face, and she spots her sitting on a bench with Yamato. As he also sees her walking past the windows, Megumi tells him to focus, but two chicks from her fanbase show up to see her in person for the first time. After she talks with them, Yamato commends her on making time for her fans, and she explains that it is all part of being the hottest creature on the planet before telling him to focus on the modeling lessons she has been trying to give him. During lunch, Yamato stops at Mei's class so they can eat together, so she tries to call Asami and the others, but he stops her so they can finally have some time alone. The hotties obsessing over his glizzy then try to get his attention, so he takes her up to the roof instead. After she opens up his food box, he gets curious about hers, but she tries to hide and gets pinned down in the process. Instead of popping her cherry with the ultimate missionary slam, he pulls back and asks about the cookies she made. She tells him that Nagi helped her with the recipe, so he tries to taste it, but she drags it away and eats it all before promising to make a batch that doesn't taste like sewer pipes. After classes the next day, Megumi shows them all a new set of pictures from a shoot, but this time, Mei gets tired of faking interest. After classes, Yamato promises to text her before getting on the train with Megumi, who then apologizes for keeping them apart. While they keep talking, Mei continues working on her cookies and eagerly waits for the text he promised her. Hours later, they finish with the photo shoot and start heading home, so Yamato tries to text Mei, but Megumi tells him about the food she made earlier on and asks if he would like to come over and help her finish it. Minutes later, they get to her place, so he takes a look around and admits to being shocked that an upcoming Vogue model lives like she just escaped the homeless shelter. After pretending to like simple living, she serves him some food, and he asks how she has so many veggies, so she tells him about her grandmother's farm and how she prefers making her own food to save money. He ends up getting a second plate while she talks about how living alone can be emotionally draining and asks if he can keep coming over after work to eat with her. Later on that night, Mei finally gets the text from him and tries to ask why he sent it late, but she changes her mind at the last moment to avoid drama. As the days go on, he continues spending all his time with Megumi to the point where Aiko and Asami start to notice. After he takes off his bracelet for a shoot, Mei starts to understand what trust issues actually mean, but keeps acting like the plain text he sends every night is enough to keep her kitty juiced. In class days later, Asami talks about how Yamato has been too busy for everyone else ever since he joined the agency, and that snaps the last cord holding Mei's heart together. So she gets up and slowly walks out just as Aiko shows up. She tries to get some space in the hallway, but then two girls talk about seeing Yamato leaving Megumi's place and express how happy they are that he is finally dating a fellow hottie before seeing Mei and running off. Her heart immediately starts beating at the speed of sound, and Asami calls out to her with Aiko to ask if she wants to go out together. Upon seeing her trying to wipe the tears, Asami gets closer to ask what the problem is, but she keeps saying it's nothing, so Aiko grabs her by the shirt and tells her to stop acting like a desperate weakling if she can't own up to what is actually troubling her. After slapping Aiko, Asami admits to knowing that Mei has been struggling ever since Megumi showed up and apologizes with a hug to console her. She ends up telling them both how hard it has been and says she no longer trusts him because he never said anything about going to Megumi's place. After Asami says she also feels bad when girls talk to Kenji, Aiko tells them that being suspicious isn't always bad because she can't count the number of guys that cheated on her. She further tells Mei to do something to show how serious she is about Yamato instead of staying on the fence and waiting for some miracle. After the pep talk, Mei waits until the hallways get packed and walks straight to Yamato before dragging his tie and leaning in for a passionate kiss. Seconds later, she pulls back, and he sees the tears she has been holding in. She tries to run off, but he stops her to ask if they can walk home together again. After classes, he holds hands with her as they walk together, but she keeps thinking about what he might be doing with Megumi and barely responds to anything he says. He then decides to stop at a park and tells her that Kuro has been growing a lot recently to see if that will get her interested, but she keeps giving the same soft response. He ignores the signs and talks about how good it feels to have some alone time so they can tell each other anything. She almost asks about his nightly hangouts at Megumi's place, but he starts yapping about how she wants him to continue modeling, so she tells him to do whatever he wants. He then reminds her that she supported his modeling and grabs her hands before saying he doesn't want her to pounce on his wood like the other day at his place. She gets embarrassed and tells him to stop thinking she is an unhinged creep like him, but that strikes a chord, so he releases her hands and decides to head home alone. She walks home in more emotional pain than before, and her mom decides to spend the evening rambling on about what face mask will magically fix her ugliness, so she leaves to be alone in her room. In class the next morning, her eye bags get Aiko and Asami worried, so Asami hands over a special limited edition key and tells her that Kenji also gave one to Yamato. Mei then asks if the theme park behind the key will be fun for couples, and Asami teases her for trying so hard to be the perfect girl, causing her to finally crack a smile. Shortly after that, she checks her phone for a text from Yamato, but then Megumi spots the key and asks if she is matching with Yamato before saying they are a great couple and walking off with a smile faker than the Nike Tech you got for Christmas. Moments later, Kenji asks Yamato why he isn't wearing the keychain, and while they start a friendly argument about it, Mei gets to the door and overhears two girls talking about an interview where Mei admitted to spending quality time every night with her Prince Charming. She then goes to distract herself with a stray cat in the backyard, but after not finding it, she packs her stuff to leave. Asami tries to follow her, but she says she wants to handle her issues alone and leaves. Aiko then tells Asami to give her space to process her feelings and suggests visiting a bakery together. Later that day, Aiko calls Yamato out to show him the interview and tells him that everyone in school now thinks he dumped Mei to smash Megumi's flat buns every night. Yamato gets shocked and says there's nothing going on between him and Megumi, but Aiko says it doesn't matter because he wouldn't like it if Mei was going to a random dude's place every night without telling him. Upon finally realizing his mistake, he runs off to find Mei, who is currently at the park wondering why she didn't ask about Megumi before he left the other day. Minutes later, Megumi calls Yamato to remind him that they have a photo shoot in a few hours, but he tells her to cancel and keeps searching for Mei. Meanwhile, she has just gotten to the bakery, which surprises her boss, so she explains that there was nothing left to do. As she drops her stuff in a locker to prepare for work, Yamato finds her house and asks for her through the bell, but her mom says she isn't around, so he takes off running again. Just as she starts cleaning up a tray, a wannabe bad boy walks in and grabs a couple of treats before dropping them on the counter. He then sees her keychain and immediately grabs her hand to ask why she even found such a rare item. After she threatens to call the police, he pulls back and apologizes before giving her a history lesson on his obsession with the keychain. He then asks if she can give it to him and says he won't give up on getting it. But then she remembers that Yamato also has one and refuses. Left with no option but to accept defeat, he apologizes for being intense again and says he is enrolling into the school she attends before leaving. Later that evening, Mei leaves the bakery and keeps waiting for a text message notification from Yamato until her eyes start to leak. She then tries to stop the tears, but the bracelet he made her accidentally gets ripped, triggering flashes of the way their relationship has changed. As she drops her bag with a defeated look on her face, Yamato finally spots her and runs over. After catching his breath, he sees the tears and hugs her until she pulls away and explains how much stress she has been going through while thinking of him. He then apologizes for not noticing how much pain she was in and swears that he didn't do anything with Megumi before seeing the bracelet. As he bends over to gather the beads, she joins him and her sad look causes him to tear up. So he hugs her again to apologize for having the same brain matter as a prehistoric ape. At school the next day, Yamato tells Megumi about his decision to quit modeling so he can be with Mei. She gets shocked and asks if he is really about to give up his one ticket to being a world-famous model. And he claims to not be interested in having more money than Elon Musk if it means not being able to love his girl. He then finds Mei in the backyard with the cat and thanks her for getting the bracelet fixed before asking to go home with her again. After they talk, she finds Asami with Aiko and apologizes for always troubling them with her issues, but Aiko tells her not to worry and promises to always help if she needs anything. Just then, Megumi shows up to ask Asami if she wants to follow her to a shoot, but Aiko reminds her that she already has plans with Kenji, so she politely declines. Megumi then tells her not to worry about it and runs off to find the next mindless NPC she can use to make her miserable life look a little better. Aiko asks if they have noticed how fake she is, and Asami still tries to defend her, so Aiko points out the way she completely ignored Mei. Minutes later, Mei gets back to class and realizes that Megumi still wants her man, but she decides to keep fighting for their relationship. Meanwhile, Kenji and Yamato sit at the bench for the usual chat and barely notice Megumi, who keeps staring at Yamato and wonders why he chose the calm, loving chick over one that clearly has daddy issues. On the way home after school, Yamato asks Mei why she put so much effort into fixing the bracelet, so she explains how wearing it makes her feel really close to him at all times. Moments later, they get to her job, but he sees that she is not ready to say goodbye yet, so he decides to kill time in a nearby store so they can spend more time together after she gets off work. After she heads inside, he starts looking for a store and gets spotted by Masashi, who then asks if he is up for a karaoke night. He declines the offer to continue window shopping, so Masashi asks what he is buying, but Aiko notices what is actually happening and extends her greeting to Mei before dragging Masashi away. Just as Yamato finds a store and decides to get Mei a gift, Kai rides past the store on his bike and enters the bakery to shop. As Mei packs his order, he asks for the keychain again, but she refuses, so he asks if she even knows about its powers. Upon realizing that she barely knows anything about it, he tells her that it has the power to keep lovers tied to each other forever. Her reaction gets him curious, so he asks if she has a boyfriend, and the store owner also joins the chat to hear about Mei's love life. By the time she finishes up, it starts raining, but Yamato comes prepared with an umbrella and tells her not to bother apologizing because she has been starved of his undivided attention for so long. Barely a few minutes later, they get to her place, and she starts wishing he lived on the outskirts of town so they could take longer walks after school. After he also says he wants to spend more time with her, she sees that his shirt got soaked and offers to let him use the dryer inside. He ends up in her room without a shirt, and she keeps protecting her eyes from his chiseled abs while he teases her to hide how embarrassed he actually feels. He then sees the bracelet again and remembers to give her the gift he bought earlier on. As she opens it and finds a ring, he tells her that he actually got a pair so they can each have one as a stronger symbol of their love. She thanks him for it, but he asks why she is still calling him by his surname, so she admits to being nervous, and he decides to help with a hug. Using that opportunity, she takes in his scent, and he suddenly remembers that his pipe has not been cleaned in a while, so she shoves her down to handle business. Just as he reaches in, her mom gets back home and keeps calling out to her before finding him sitting like a captured fugitive while she pretends to be asleep. Minutes later, she tries to make him comfortable at the dinner table, but he continues apologizing for flexing his abs in front of Mei until she asks why he is dating her. The question initially shocks him, but after he carefully explains everything that made him fall in love with her, she thanks him for being there for Mei, and he also thanks her for not calling the cops. Mei then escorts him outside and thanks him for being so respectful to her mom before they share a passionate hug. At school the next day, Asami sees the ring on her phone and starts acting like she is living through the perfect love story. Just then, Megumi walks past with her fangirls and struggles to hide how upset she is seeing Mei so happy, and her friend Momoko starts to notice. As the days go by, the same cycle continues repeating until the day Kai finally enrolls and walks up to the group at the bench to say hi to Yamato. He then sees the second keychain hanging out of his pocket and asks Mei why she didn't tell him that Yamato was her boyfriend before heading inside. After school, Mei asks Yamato how they know each other on the way to her job, so Yamato explains that Kai is the best friend he betrayed years ago. He also asks how she knows him, so she tells him about his addiction to cakes before they reach the bakery. Moments later, Kai shows up as usual and Mei tells him that she just found out about his relationship with Yamato. He then explains how he actually came back to take revenge on his bullies, but she tells him to stop thinking it will make him feel any better because she was also bullied and just recently learned to feel better by risking her heart for new relationships. He still decides to do things his way, so she offers him a sample of a new cake the bakery is trying to put out and wishes him luck. After leaving, he remembers the guy that turned him into an ashtray and quickly heads back to school to ambush him. Upon seeing his face, he intentionally bumps into him, but the bully quickly apologizes and runs off without even recognizing him. He then takes some time to think about everything and remembers what Mei said before tracking Yamato down and saying he likes her. Later that night, Nagi finds Yamato looking through the theme park's website and asks if she can go with him, but he refuses, saying it's for a special day with Mei. On the school rooftop the next day, Asami gets surprised hearing that Mei still feels too shy about being in a relationship to tell anyone in class. As she tries to convince her, Kai shows up, so Asami makes him join their conversation, and they end up mostly talking about the theme park while Megumi secretly eavesdrops. Several minutes later, she finds Kai in the hallway, and one of her fans coincidentally offers her a special gift wrap with special items from the theme park. After they leave, Kai asks her how it feels to have mindless NPCs that will do anything she wants, but she plays it off to look innocent and offers him the entire gift wrap. He excitedly accepts it, but then smacks her on the head and says it's wrong to just give up something from a fan who believes in her. She then confesses to not actually liking the theme park, so he asks why she put on an act for the girls, but she ignores the question and hands over tickets to the park. Once again, he interrogates her, so she admits to only wanting to get closer to Yamato through him and says she will handle it on her own before leaving. Moments later, she bumps into Asami and offers to help with her boxes before asking if they can hang out like before. After finishing up with her tasks, they keep talking until Megumi sees Mei walking towards them and gets Asami to head into the ladies' room with her. After classes, she then stops Yamato at his locker and pulls him aside to say that she overheard Kai planning to take Mei out for a date at the theme park. Yamato tells her that she probably misunderstood what they were talking about, but she assures him that it really happened and says she just wants to look out for him. The next day, Mei sees him in the hallway, but he ignores her and keeps thinking about what Kai said the other day. Meanwhile, Momoko sees Megumi smiling in class and tries to ask why, but then her expression suddenly changes, so Momoko asks if she is bipolar or just has trouble expressing what she is actually feeling. After telling her to stop trying to become an MC, she heads over to the agency and puts on another friendly facade for the new model, Asami, before sitting in the dressing room and thinking back to when everyone called her an ugly human giraffe. Back at school, Mei meets up with Yamato to head out, but then he starts asking a bunch of questions about the kind of stuff she discusses with Kai before walking off on his own. The next day, she sees Aiko and tries to talk, but Asami runs up with Megumi to ask if she wants to hang out together. Megumi then says she heard all about her eating disorder and commends her on sacrificing for love before asking for some tips, as they could help her become a better model. After agreeing to the hangout, Aiko asks Mei if she wants to join, but she sees Megumi glaring and says she already has plans of her own. Mei ends up all alone again and tries to convince herself that it is not a big deal, but after remembering how fun life has been recently, the hurt starts building up. Meanwhile, Megumi takes the girls to a special restaurant and keeps talking about how she is connected to the owner, while Aiko starts to sense that something is off. Just then, Kai rides past Mei and stops to ask why she seems sad, but that question ends up releasing the tears she has been trying to fight back, so she apologizes for being a crybaby and says it's nothing to worry about. He then gets closer and tells her to stop hiding her feelings all the time and takes her to a playground where he explains how she is actually a weirdo for motivating everyone to be better when she is clearly still struggling with basic self-confidence. After she admits to missing her friends in Yamato, he tells her to take action and get them back instead of waiting for someone to fix everything. During lunch the next day, she finds Yamato and asks if they can walk home together, but he claims to have plans already, so she promises to wait until whenever he finishes. They end up walking together again, and that makes her feel a lot more optimistic. But then, during work the following day, Kai shows up to talk and asks if she has any plans with Yamato. After she says they don't really have any dates planned, he asks if they just like being a boring couple because he would always want to go on dates if he had a girl. That gets her curious, so she asks if he has anyone special in his life yet, and he says there is one person, but the love is one-sided. She then thanks him for the talk at the playground and says it has really helped her, and he starts describing how he was in a really dark place before his special someone said a few words that changed the way he thinks. He further explains details of the special someone that begins to sound really familiar until he points in her face and says it has always been her. The very next day, rumors spread around school about how Mei easily cheated on Yamato with Kai for tickets to the theme park. As Yamato storms out to find Kai, he apologizes to Mei for not realizing that his invitation to see the theme park together would cause so much drama. Just as he sees Megumi at a window and starts to connect the dots, Yamato finds them and tries to demand answers from Mei. Kai defends her and says he only invited her to lift her spirits because she has been upset from always being starved of his attention. Yamato tells him to shut the hell up, but he only gets louder and says he has no right to complain when he couldn't even see that the girl he claims to love has been in pain. Yamato tries to defend himself, but then Kei reminds him that he had always been a spineless wannabe who always ignored what he knew was right to fit in and make everyone else happy. Upon hearing this, Yamato tries to knock him out, but he counters with a nasty jawbreaker that puts Yamato's legs to sleep. Kai continues the verbal assault by reminding Yamato that what happened in the past makes it easier for him to understand Mei, but Yamato promises to keep fighting for her even if he doesn't fully understand everything about the way she feels. Kai then realizes that Yamato isn't the same spineless snake he once was and says that he actually only likes Mei as a person and pulled the whole stunt to see if he would take her seriously. After apologizing for messing up his perfect jawline, he leaves, and Yamato apologizes to her for not understanding what she has been going through. After she also apologizes for not seeing that his feelings were hurt, he pulls her to the ground and promises to do better. The next morning, Asami and Aiko get shocked by the examination placements before Mei shows up to talk with them. After Asami suggests going out together, she thanks them for not abandoning her, but they both remind her of the promise to always help out wherever she needs it. Just then, Yamato shows up, and the expression on her face makes them curious, so they interrogate her to know if they finally smashed.
Stop it.
Meanwhile, Megumi sees Momoko waiting for her and decides to ignore her, but one of her fans starts to think outside the box for the first time in his worthless life. During lunch, Yamato feeds Mei his sandwich at the rooftop before showing her the hotel options for their time at the theme park. While they talk about it, Kei receives compliments from two random guys who can't believe that he actually punched Yamato. He then spots Megumi and takes her outside to ask why she has been bullying Mei, but she claims to know nothing about it and says he has no right to judge after he tried to snatch her from Mei. After reminding her that he at least had the balls to own up to his feelings, he asks if she really likes Yamato because she would have directly gone for him instead of playing chess with everyone he knows. He further asks why she pretends with all her so-called friends, but she snaps and claims she does it all to keep them happy. After saying that her modeling career wouldn't be a dumpster fire if she stopped spending all her time being an attention-seeking maniac, he heads back inside. In class, a few minutes later, Aiko and Asami keep going back and forth over a gift until Megumi shows up and asks what it is about. Asami then tells her that it is actually for Mei, as she might finally get her V card revoked, but Megumi immediately switches the topic to ask if they want to hang out and possibly meet a couple of celebrities. Aiko turns down the offer and tells her to take Asami, but she also refuses so they can figure out the gift for Mei. Megumi then explains all the perks of hanging out with her to make sure they understand and eventually lets her intrusive thoughts slip out. So Aiko tells her to stop thinking they will worship her because she knows how to smile for a camera. Little Miss Perfection suddenly breaks character and takes a trip down memory lane that reminds her how her having no dad and a deadbeat mom made her into the mess she so desperately tries to hide. At the karaoke place later on, she gets upset that Momoko showed up, so Taku says he invited her, and she demands to know why she wasn't consulted first. He responds by getting up to leave with the rest of the crew and telling her that they only put up with her obvious lack of common sense because she has basically been a human wallet that paid for everything they wanted. After they leave, she heads over to the studio for a photo shoot, but then Asumi tells her that there was a lot of buzz online after the last magazine release. As she leaves to start the shoot, Megumi looks through the comments online and realizes that everyone has finally seen her true colors, so she storms out and keeps trying to call someone while on the train. Minutes later, Kai sees her walking into a grocery store and watches as she fills up the shopping basket with enough chips to induce a heart attack. She then thinks back to when she first started taking care of her looks and realizes that she had to act like a shameless bop just to attract average dudes. As she gets back to her place and smashes her phone in frustration, Maggie finishes packing up for her weekend with Yamato and realizes that her mom has been peeping the entire time. The next day, she ends up running late as usual and apologizes at the station, but he can barely think straight as he has never seen her get all dressed up before. She notices his weird reaction and tries to run back home, but he pulls her back so they can get to the train on time. Just a few minutes later, Yamato falls asleep while holding her hands, so she tries to act cute while knowing that his weight can crush her if he falls. When they finally get to the theme park, she tries to find a map, but he tells her not to worry about that and drags her to the first ride. After hours of giving her back-to-back heart attacks, They get to a fountain, and he asks if she had fun before seeing that her eyes have become waterfalls. He immediately apologizes and asks if she wants to leave, but she stops him and says she wants to enjoy every moment with him. He then decides to spend the rest of the day visiting attractions she can live through before taking a break to get some food. The next moment, Nagi shows up with her brother Daichi, who explains that she wouldn't stop begging him to bring her. After she tells him to start heading back, he asks if she will really be okay on her own, but she tells him not to worry and runs into Mei. After Daichi leaves, Nagi accuses Yamato of trying to keep Mei all to himself and says she won't let go of her for the rest of the day. As they go back in to find an attraction, she finds a ride and grabs Mei again to stop her. Meanwhile, Momoko has just gotten to Megumi's place to check on her, but she refuses to open up and asks why she even bothered coming when she hates her like everyone else. While her mental breakdown reaches critical levels, Mei continues having the time of her life until nightfall. Yamato then carries Nagi back to the hotel room and tucks her into bed, while Mei gets shocked by how big the room is and takes in the view. After getting seated, he apologizes for not being able to give her the full experience because of Nagi, but she tells him not to worry about it because she had never imagined going to a theme park with a hot boyfriend. Before she can go into more detail, he falls asleep, so she gets close for a good look and gets pulled in for a cuddle session. After reminding her not to wake Nagi up, he asks if they can just hold each other and decides to keep his magnum under control. The next morning, she wakes up in bed just as he finishes with the bath and says he might have meant her melons while she was asleep. Before she can yell, he grabs her for a hug before getting a call from the agency and telling her that they are all searching for Megumi. After getting Mei back to the train station with Nagi, Yamato runs off to find Megumi, who is still at her place getting closer to crackhead status. Momoko shows up to talk her out of the madness, but she still refuses to say a word, so Momoko turns to leave right before Yamato shows up and asks if she is still alive. He then heads to her door and tells her to open up, along with Momoko, but Megumi tells them both to leave her alone because they all don't really even care about her. She further says she wants to be alone because they will all eventually betray her, and that reminds Yamato of when Mei said something similar, so he calmly explains why living with that belief isn't good for her. After he reminds her that there are still people who actually care about her, Momoko apologizes for not being there when she needed help the most. Megumi then tells her to stop the pretense, but she continues apologizing and asks if she can come out and share her feelings with them instead of staying locked up with her chips. The next moment, Megumi goes over the edge and starts yelling about how nobody has ever made her the first choice, but then Momoko asks why she cares what they think and tells her to focus on getting better without putting on a show to be liked by everyone. Momoko reminds her that she has always treated her like a star even before she became confident in her looks. Upon hearing all this, Megumi's eyes start to soak up, so she finally opens the door to melt into Momoko's arms. As Yamato feels relieved to know she will be okay, he sees Mei, who had also been worried about Megumi. Later on, she stops by the agency to properly apologize for getting everyone worked up and meets Momoko outside after thankfully keeping her job. In school the next day, she finds a bunch of threatening letters from her now bitter fans and accepts that she will never be the hot goddess they once worshipped. While Asami begins noticing how the others in class always take her table outside, Momoko tries talking to her biggest haters, but they get confused and almost attack her for still choosing to defend Megumi after what happened. Days later, Megumi finds Asami with her table and tries to scold her, thinking she is the one always moving it. But after two haters call her a spineless wannabe, she tells Megumi that she is tired of the bullying and has decided to take the table inside whenever she sees it in the hallway. Megumi gets confused and asks why she is still being so nice after everything that happened, so Asami tells her that she enjoyed the time they spent together, even if most of it was fake. After thanking her, Megumi grabs the table and tells her not to worry, as she has been through a lot more than that, causing Asami to break down in tears. Megumi then takes her new identity a step further by cutting her signature hairstyle before the next shoot, and Asumi commends her on being strong and says she can't imagine cutting hers. Megumi responds by telling her to stop obsessing over what the world thinks so she can actually grow in her career and not end up being a one-hit wonder. As the days go on, Megumi gets herself back on magazine covers, and Mei continues working on her relationship with Yamato. Weeks later, her mom reminds her that the summer festival is coming up and asks if she is going to invite him, but she gets shy and acts like they are still platonic. On the day of the festival, she finishes up with work and finds a text from Asami, who had invited everyone to meet up at a statue so they can have fun together. Minutes later, she shows up and apologizes for being late while catching her breath. Asami then asks why Megumi and Kai didn't show up, so Aiko reminds her that not everyone is an unemployed crybaby. Once they get to the festival spot, Mei becomes fixated on how good the girls look in their yukatas and wishes she had worn one. But Yamato tells her not to worry because she will always look like a hottie to him, no matter what she wears. After hours of trying out so many activities, Asami's belly reaches its breaking point, so they all decide to head home as the firework display is still hours away. When Mei gets back, her mom asks why she hasn't been answering her calls and tells her to get changed so she can put on a yukata, but she says there is no point as she has already gone to the festival. Her mom then reminds her of the fireworks festival and says it will be the perfect chance to show Yamato that he is actually dating a baddie. Hours pass, and she is still helping Mei get ready while everyone else is already watching as the fireworks start going off. After getting ready, Mei sends Yamato a text asking to meet up at the shrine and takes off running to get to him on time. Meanwhile, Kai sees Megumi leaving a store and asks why she didn't go to the festival, so she tells him that meeting new people is stressful and uses him as an example because her life has felt like a hell loop after meeting him. Almost an hour later, the last firework goes off and Mei, who is still running to the shrine, starts getting emotional as she remembers the last one she watched with her mom and dad when he was still alive. After finally reaching the shrine, she apologizes for calling him out and not being able to show up on time, but he can barely hear a word she is saying as every inch of his body becomes obsessed with how good she looks. Not realizing that he is considering having her for dinner, she continues apologizing for wasting his time until he pulls her in for a hug and shuts her up with a steamy kiss. While on a walk with him a couple of days later, Mei gets lost in her head as she dreams of a future with him until he asks if she is getting tired. When they eventually get to her place, he suggests taking a detour to walk together for a little, and she agrees, so he tells her that he can finally read her mind. She gets confused, so he further explains that he has learned to figure out what she wants from her expressions because she doesn't talk a lot. But he also says that he has to hear her say the 3 magic words. At school the following day, he sends her a text saying he will be skipping because he caught a cold after their walk, so she tells the others, and they all get surprised because he rarely gets sick. While she starts to feel bad about having to spend the day without him, Nagi serves a meal stuffed with his drugs, and he asks why she is skipping school because she only just started attending again. She then explains that she is substituting for Mei and climbs the bed for a hug to make him feel better. Back at school a couple of hours later, Mei keeps brooding over not seeing him, so Aiko tells her to go to his place even if she has to leave a little early. Minutes later, she gets back home and packs up a wellness kit with help from her mom, but after getting close to his place, her insecurities creep in and give her second thoughts. She then decides to send him a text first, and he gets excited upon seeing it, so he tries to get ready, but then Nagi comes back in and grabs his phone before calling her and saying he doesn't want to see her. Mei starts to panic and thinks that all the time she shoved him away for trying to get close has caused him to hate her, so she turns to head back home. Nagi then begs Yamato to eat, but he refuses unless she gives his phone back and convinces himself that Mei definitely understands that Nagi is just jealous. Meanwhile, Mei's panic attack is just about to reach the red zone, but then Asami calls her to ask if she needs motivation. After hearing that she is heading back home, she tells the others, so Kenji grabs the phone to tell her that no stickman would turn down an opportunity to get his pipe drained by his hot girlfriend. After Masashi says the same thing, Kai collects the phone and asks for the details of what happened. He then tells her that it is definitely all Nagi's plan because Yamato would never say such a thing, so she thanks him and decides to finish what she started. At that moment, Megumi finds the others and says she is thinking of paying Yamato a very special visit, so Momoko drags her away to get her obsession under control. As Mei walks back to Yamato's place, Nagi tries to make him fall asleep, but he keeps waiting for a text and snatches the phone immediately it rings, but it turns out to be Hayakawa. He first checks to make sure he is not too sick and proceeds to tell him that he has finally found someone he actually wants to take seriously. After Yamato congratulates him on giving up his one-night stand business, Hayakawa tells him the name of the bakery where the girl works and says he is going to pick her up for a date. Yamato realizes that it is the same bakery where Mei works, but Hayakawa hangs up before he can get more details. Yamato then spends the next few minutes trying to make himself believe that Hayakawa has a thing for the middle-aged baker and her overused lower lips, but the delusion doesn't work, and he begins to panic, thinking Mei is about to dump him. Nagi tries to calm him down, but he refuses and tries to leave, so she pushes him down so he won't have enough strength left to run off. By then, Mei is already outside his place, but simply pushing the doorbell suddenly becomes the most dangerous mission she has ever embarked on. With her insecurities and fear increasing by the minute, she spends minutes trying to push the button and eventually runs behind a pole to spy, hoping that he will just come out for no reason. The next moment, a fun-sized lover boy shows up with flowers and also experiences the same problem, so she walks over to ask if he came for Nagi. After he admits to it and says he is not sure if she will like the gesture, she tells him to trust his gut and returns to the pole to hide while he puts on his big boy pants and rings the bell. After Nagi answers and heads to the door, Yamato takes that opportunity to escape, but Mei hides at the worst moment possible, so he runs past her, and they both don't even realize it. He then reaches the bakery in time to see Hayakawa leave with a new girl working there and gets his sanity back before the baker sees him and starts glazing harder than Kendrick Lamar fans after the Super Bowl performance. He tells her about his cold to escape the yapping, but she makes him wait and runs in to get him some treats. Thankfully, Kai shows up and promises to cover for him before pushing him to go save Mei from going insane. By then, Nagi is still at the door with her friend, thanking him for being so considerate, and Mei uses their love as motivation to try calling Yamato again. At that moment, he also pulls out his phone to call her, but then he sees her call and answers right before the battery runs out. As the call gets cancelled, Mei becomes convinced that he now hates her and wanders around like a lost puppy before getting to the spot where they usually meet up for dates. Minutes later, she tries to send him a text, but then he finally finds her and stops to get his lungs under control. Just as he tries to explain, she starts to cry and runs into him for a really tight hug, so he holds her close to make sure she feels better. With the lovebirds finally learning to trust each other, will Mei let him taste the forbidden fruit, or will Megumi cook up a new tactic to steal him away forever? That's it for this video. Comment which character you liked best, and don't forget to turn on post notifications after subscribing so you won't miss our next recap.